patriots are also weighing in on that thought and discussing reparations for the descendants of slaves in the U.S. And Chris, I know you've been following the costs, what that might look like.
I always think of the cost.
Yeah, well, you always got to tally the cost up. American voters think about the cost too. So what actually is the cost?
$17.1 trillion.
Nothing small. Pennies
on the dollar. Oh, well, look, so we have first the unpaid wages that did not go to slaves. That's $12.9 trillion. And then you also have the lingering economic impact from Jim Crow, from redlining, from the criminal justice system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's $4.2 trillion, and we've got $17.1 trillion. So the big question isn't so much how much is it going to cost, but rather who is going to be receiving reparations and how exactly are reparations going to be paid out. This is not the first time the United States, I need to make that clear, the United States has paid restitution to groups it has wronged before. Native Americans, not at all the amount that they deserved or to the amount of people that they impacted, but Native Americans have received reparations. Japanese people that were in internment camps received reparations. So this isn't something that is necessarily new to the United States government. And right now we have this bill, H.R. 40, that's being debated in the House, or that received its first hearing in over a decade last week. And essentially that's what the bill is to find out. It's not necessarily to say we're going to give reparations, but it's to say who exactly should be receiving.
So who would get, how many people?
So right now they say approximately 30 million people, but still they have to come up with a proposal of who deserves reparations.
$17 trillion.
I don't know.
I would argue that as a white man in America, you've received the benefits that have.
That's what we're talking about here too.
But I know a lot of white men in America that if you just looked at their financial situation and didn't see their color or where they came from, you'd be like, that guy hadn't benefited. Right here in New York, within 1 block of here, that guy hadn't benefited at all. He has no money in savings, has no retirement, has no investments. He doesn't have a home. He has an education. He's got plenty of debt.
He might not have benefited from America, but he certainly hasn't been harmed by it either.
Well, this is what we're talking about.
That is the entire part.
Yeah, but the question is, okay, my grandfather was born on a ship on the way over here. So he never had papers to work in the United States, and so he had to do things in the darkness of jobs in this country. So should he have been entitled something because somebody missed his papers?
Or you start to look at other people too. I was talking about the immigration crisis in this country as well, and you talk about other people that might be impacted by it. Whatever inequalities exist in this country as well.
It's not a new thing.
And you do start to realize, okay, if this does get applied, and as you mentioned, it has happened before, there's a historical precedent. The Japanese internment camps and
globally as well. Germany paid restitution out essentially because of the Nazis, and they paid out to the Jewish people and to the state of Israel reparations. And actually, this bill has actually looked at proposals that actually would model a reparations payment plan, essentially, that would be modeled after Germany. Because some payments aren't necessarily.
It'd be a huge economic boom if you distributed $17 trillion.
Yeah, we've seen that.
Wealthy people in this country are going to figure out, how do I get that money?
But you're considering it as a lump sum payment, and a lot of people have said lump sum payments are not necessarily the best idea. What it is to take that money and to reinvest it into the Black community, to allow Black Americans to essentially regain some of the wealth that they were completely shut off from for hundreds of years. I mean, this is not the original sin that we can turn our back on that only lasted for 10 years. This is a slave trade that lasted for hundreds of years. This is Jim Crow. This is Black people unable to buy homes. This is Black people that are imprisoned.
You can also start to make the same arguments too. I mean, if we're talking about inequality, the gender gap is discussed all the time as well, and you can start to make the argument that the same kind of inequalities that existed for many years, maybe women should also be.
They should, and they should. Women should be.
Politically, there's a lot of questions.
As a woman, obviously, I want to address inequalities when it comes to gender.
Yes.
We cannot, however, describe we need to stop doing this game of comparison where we like to compare the plight of Black Americans with other groups.
Politically, these are the questions that are going to be asked. If you start to pass this, this is what will hang in the balance here if you're debating this.
And I welcome the debate.
And
I welcome the debate. I hope.
While we need highways and bridges.
Yeah. All right. Well, it wasn't the only thing. I mean, this was one important piece that was discussed last night on the stage. I don't know if it'll come back up tonight when we hit night 2. Again, there's a lot of candidates, a lot of pieces of debate to be had on that stage.
Some of the political candidates tonight have actually said they support reparations. So we might get a question on it tonight.
You might see it again.
We might not.
You might see it again.
say she did a good job of handling this, guys. This basically turned into a 2-on-1. You see how Muscles over there was sitting in that chair? He looked like he was gonna burst with those muscles. Talking about he wants to get some of that money. This ain't got nothing to do with you, bro. This is about us. This is about ADOS. And you see how they try to inject all these other groups? You cannot compare anything else to chattel enslavement and everything that's happened to us after this. They could try to distract, they could try to deflect, they could try to compare, they could try to play all these games, but it's not going to matter. You cannot compare yourselves to ADOS. No one can when you're talking about the United States. And we're coming for the bag, and this price tag may just get even higher. One question I have is, I've seen these figures. I've seen 10 trillion, 14 trillion, now 17 trillion. I've even seen into the 20 trillions. But one question I have, basically talking about 246, 247 years unpaid labor, and then more than 150 years since then, the debt has not been paid back. Has anyone factored in, based upon what fair wages would have considered to be at that time, has anyone factored in inflation and also interest and fees and penalties for a debt that is owed, a debt that has not been paid, but a debt that needs to be collected? Because if no one is figuring that into these figures we're getting, you could potentially, which is an estimate I gave earlier, you could potentially be talking about the total cost of reparations being $30 trillion, if not a little bit more than that. And I'm also going to say this. I'm tired of people talking about it's not necessarily about cash payments. It's not necessarily not about a lump sum. Why shouldn't it be? Okay? Our ancestors didn't have the ability to choose whether or not they were going to be here. They didn't have the possibility to receive compensation for the labor, because our ancestors literally built this nation. There wouldn't really be the America that we know it if our ancestors did not build it. And since they weren't able to collect in their lifetime, that doesn't mean that America can simply just run off the clock. And there are descendants of those who should have been paid. So essentially, it's like the estate of ADOS. And America owes the estate of ADOS. And the descendants of those will collect on the behalf of the estate. This is an inheritance. This is a debt that should be owed. And it needs to be paid. Okay? And look, even Muscles over there, who's sitting in that chair, even he had to admit, it would be a huge economic boom, at least if those of us who would stay in the United States, it would be a huge economic boom if America paid reparations. It would be a stimulus. It would be a Marshall Plan for ADOS, and at least for those of us that would stay in the United States, America would get the benefit of that. Because think of the money we would put back into the economy. Think of the businesses and the industries that we would create. Think of the jobs that we would create for ourselves and maybe even for other people, including other immigrants in the African diaspora. So America needs to pay up. Now, right now, based upon the number of households, ADOS households, that there are in the United States, under her, well, it's not her figures because she had sources, but under the figures that she presented, we're talking about more than $1 million, just over a little bit of $1 million per ADOS household, 17.1 trillion. So if it's a little less, like 10 trillion, 14 trillion, then that's still several hundreds of thousands of dollars. What if it's more than that? You're maybe talking about almost multi-million per ADOS household, maybe like 3 million or so per ADOS household. America can print the money, and America needs to pay up.